The man drops the poison into his wife's water. Then he calmly handed it to his wife. After accepting the invitation to a toast with a smile on his face, he made an excuse to leave, but he hid in the dark. He watched his wife drink the poison. The poison had no odor. 8 hours after taking it, the heart will stop beating, but it leaves no trace. All the symptoms were the same as a heart attack. As expected, his wife died of a heart attack soon after. For the next few days, Nick put on a sad face. Finally, after his family had left for the night, Nick excitedly rode his motorcycle. He rode his motorcycle to a hidden house. The girl who opened the door was the reason why he had poisoned his wife. It turned out that she was not only much older than him, she gave him a decent job, and she was very strong. Whenever he didn't do as he was told, she threatened to kick him out of the company. He was sick of it, but he had to put up with it. A few months ago, he met Carla, who was gentle and considerate. After a while, the two of them planned it all. All they had to do was pass the autopsy and get his wife's huge inheritance. He could take Carla and get out of here. But that's when Nick got a call from the police. Just moments ago, his wife's body had disappeared from the morgue. When he heard the news, the two of them were dumbfounded. Had their plan been exposed? Carla was worried that the police had discovered the plan, but Nick was sure he had missed a beat. He decided to find out what had happened. When they arrived at the coroner's office half an hour ago, the guards here ran out of the woods into the road in a panic. He was hit by a car and fell unconscious. They found out from the security cameras he escaped from the morgue. Seems like he was in some kind of shock. But here's the weird thing, except for the camera that captured the guard, the rest were vandalized. They couldn't find anything, and then they found a body missing from the morgue, Nick's wife, and when they heard that, Nick was relieved. It meant that he hadn't been exposed. Officer Jamie asked him if he and his wife had offended anyone. Nick answered that they hadn't offended anyone, and that's when Jamie was called out, and Nick called Carla. He said he wasn't suspected, but still asked Carla to go to the hospital to find out about the guard, to make sure the police were telling the truth. Then he hung up and deleted the record, and then the coroner asked him if his wife had any medical problems. Nick denied it. Then he tried to find out if the coroner, to see if the medical examiner had come to a conclusion, had died of a heart attack. After the coroner said it was very likely, Nick relaxed a bit.
No hay que iba a invencible por la vida. Supongo que suele pasar en el futuro.
It was a statement that made people uncomfortable. He was to come in the face of his wife's death, but they didn't have a clue. After being locked up for a while, Nick was getting agitated. He demanded to go home immediately, but just then, the lights suddenly went out. The power went out in the whole building. The officers asked him to return to his office. They went off to check it out. Suddenly, there was a noise in the morgue behind him. Nick followed the sound and went in. On his wife's morgue, there was an additional metal box containing some of his wife's belongings before she died, and an empty Ziploc bag. Suddenly, Nick saw an open door next to the locker. Curiosity got the better of him. He lit a lighter to check it out, but what was inside almost scared him. It was the same drug he drugged his wife with. Before he could react, the light suddenly went on. Nick hid the bottle in his pocket. Then the police arrived. They found that the cabinet door had been pried open. The box was supposed to be in the cabinet. Jamie asked Nick why he was here. Was he looking for something of his wife's? Nick explained that he hadn't touched anything, but after checking the list and found a cell phone missing, Nick panicked, but he did what they asked him to do. He took out everything, but not the pill bottle, hoping to avoid detection. I didn't realize that Jamie had already seen his panic. He pressed him against the wall. He searched his whole body, soon found the bottle of pills. Jamie didn't know what it was, but the label on the bottle indicated that it came from Nick's lab. Nick panicked and explained he just picked it up off the floor, and he's got a lot of uses for it. It's not unusual for him to be in a place like the morgue, but that didn't convince Jamie. Just then, Nick's phone rang. Jamie asked him to answer it, and it was Carla. Before Carla could say anything, Nick pretended to be his sister. He said he was cooperating with the police in the investigation of his wife's disappearance. Then he hung up when Jamie didn't ask any more questions. Nick said he needed to use the restroom. As soon as the door closed, he immediately called Carla again. Carla had gone to the hospital to confirm the condition of the guard. The police hadn't lied to him, and Nick rushed to tell Carla that someone must have known what they were doing. That someone now leading the police to point their suspicions at him. Then he asked Carla if she had told anyone, because they were the only ones who knew about the whole plan. Carla assured him that she hadn't told anyone, but she was skeptical. If Nick had been talking in his sleep and revealed something, maybe his wife had found out their secret. These words made Nick panic because he did have a problem with talking in his sleep, but at this point, he had no choice but to stay here. He had to be careful about what he did next, but he had just washed his face. To calm himself down, I realized that the window behind me was stained and open, and there was a letter by the window. Inside was an invitation to a business celebration, and on the back was a line that read, "Close your eyes. You're still with me?" That freaked Nick out. He'd seen the invitation at home. He was trying to avoid a dinner party. He made up an excuse for his wife to go alone, and the message on the back, it was a late-night missive from his girlfriend, Carla. She and Carla were the only ones who knew about the message. Thinking about it, Nick was having trouble breathing. Was his wife pretending to be asleep? She'd found out about her and Carla. She tore it up and threw it down the toilet, but when she tried to flush it, she realized the toilet was broken, and that's when the police came in. Police officers came in. Nick closed the door behind him. He was about to be discovered by the police. He had to fight back the nausea. He took out the message from the toilet. He swallowed it. He cleaned it all up. Then he walked out as if nothing had happened. It turns out that the police have made a new discovery in the equipment room that controls the building's surveillance and electricity. They found a huge ventilation duct. It's connected to the roof. On the roof, they also found a fresh footprint, but there's something even weirder. Someone tampered with the calendar on the wall. It changed the time to March 20th, 2012. To the only door to the outside was changed to that date. Jamie asked Nick if he was familiar with the date. Nick said no. He was already confused. It was the code to his lab. The date he met Carla. He had a habit of setting his passwords on special days, a habit that only his wife knew about. But at this point, Nick could only deny it. Just as Jamie was about to ask him more, the elevator suddenly malfunctioned. A fire somewhere in the building triggered the alarm. They had to get out of there. Nick walked last on purpose. Carla called again. No one noticed him. He ducked into a room and answered it. He hadn't even said a few words. He realized there was a bracelet in front of him, and on the bracelet, it had Carla's name and his address on it. At that moment, he suddenly saw his wife's shadow staring at him from the window, but then she disappeared. Nick realized maybe she was still alive. She was playing a trick on them. He panicked. The overhead sprinklers came back on. Nick hung up the phone. He deleted the call. I don't know when. Jamie was already behind him, looked at him, immediately asked him to hand over his cell phone, but the records on his cell phone have all been cleared. They couldn't find anything on it. The one caller that they managed to get, it's also an unknown number. There's no way to find out who he's talking to. Seeing no progress in all the investigations, and officers brought in a cigarette butt found near a smoke detector in one of the bathrooms, and Nick was in that bathroom, and the lab work on the vial came back with results. The substance inside was some kind of animal venom, rarely used for medical purposes, but it can cause cardiac arrest 8 hours after ingestion. Symptoms are identical to a heart attack. All of this information strengthens Nick's suspicion. Jamie immediately instructed his subordinates to call for an escort vehicle. He wanted to bring Nick back to the station for questioning. While he waited, Nick was locked in a room and put under guard. While he thought about what to do next, there was another movement at the window. A window had been opened at some point, and the window was the glass of water that his wife had used to drink the poisoned beverage. A cold wind blew up from behind.
Esta noche serás mía.
Sobered from the shock, Nick got up. Suddenly there was a sound behind him. Nick pushed the door in. This is another morgue, and the sound was coming from a body bag. Nick found a cell phone inside, and the call was from his wife. He picked up the phone, but the caller hangs up immediately. Then there was a noise behind him. It seemed that someone had escaped. Obviously this was all done by someone. He rushed through his phone records, but all the calls came from his wife. Nick called her back, but it was answered by a waiter. He said he found the phone in the restaurant. After asking for the name of the restaurant, Nick suddenly remembered he went there with his wife. When his wife said hello to an old man, she said it was his new lawyer. Her name was Alonso, and then she joked that she was going to ask him to rewrite their marriage contract and redo the division of assets. At the time, Nick thought it was a joke, and now he thinks maybe his wife had found out by then, and the old man was looking at him. The old man was looking at him funny. To find out what his wife had done, he needed to find out who Alonso was. He called Carla again to inform him. His cell phone had been taken away by the police and told Carla everything that had happened, and asked Carla to check Alonso's identity. After a while, Nick was taken to another room. Jamie said he suspected that Nick had poisoned his wife with the substance in the bottle and then stole her body to interface with the autopsy, and Nick was immediately calm. If they said the drug didn't leave any traces, he wouldn't have had to steal the body, and this is all speculation. There's no evidence. When he heard that, Jamie laughed. He walked over to Nick with a handful of papers.
Su mujer contrató a un detective hace 3 meses.
Nick opens the file and realized that the detective, it's the old man, Alonso. Nick panicked and threw up. If his affair with Carla, Alonso had caught on tape, that would be the the end of it. Then, the police called from the other side. They found nothing useful in Alonso's house. They didn't find anything useful, but his computer hard drive is missing. Jamie ordered a search of Nick's house. Nick contacted Carla again. He was just about to say something about the detective. Carla said he already knew because he had Alonso's hard drive with him. Someone slipped the hard drive through the crack in his door. Inside was a folder named after Alonso. It was full of pictures of the two of them on dates. And here's the scary part. Of the two men plotting of how to get rid of Nick's wife were recorded and put into the folder, which means Nick's body was bugged at that time. At this point, Nick finally confirmed his wife knew everything. That's why she's been playing along with him so far, and that his ultimate target was probably Carla after all. Nick told Carla to leave, but as soon as Carla left the house, a car behind her had its lights on, coming at him fast. There was no sound on the phone. Nick panicked. He panicked and went to Jamie. He said he had to leave immediately, but Jamie simply refused. In a moment of crisis, Nick told her about his affair with Carla. His wife wasn't dead. There's still a chance for forgiveness if he tells the truth. Carla's safety was paramount. Then the two of them plotted to poison his wife. He told Jamie everything, and that he suspected she wasn't dead at all. Everything that happened today was his wife's revenge on them, and that Carla was in danger. But Jamie challenged him. Nick orchestrated his wife's death and watched him drink the poison drink. Why is his wife still alive? Nick closed his eyes. Maybe his wife switched the glasses. Then he begged Jamie in a pleading tone.
Por favor. Necesito que ayude a Carla.
And that's when the officers who searched Nick's house made an important discovery. They found a road map in Nick's house, and a handgun, and in Nick's car. They found a shovel in a gym bag, and a mask and a pair of sneakers, and the sneakers matched the footprints on the roof. Then there was news from the hospital. The guard woke up. He recalled what happened. He was on duty that night. He suddenly realized there was no footage from the security cameras. Then a noise came from the morgue. When he went in to check it out, a morgue was opened. The body inside was gone. Suddenly a dark shadow flashed. He followed it to check it out, but found a woman lying in the open elevator. Just as he went up to check if she was dead or alive, the elevator door closed. He called his superiors for backup, but the elevator behind him opened again. The woman inside had disappeared. Then a man wearing a mask came out. He shot at him. He panicked and escaped. All the evidence points to Nick. He murdered his wife, and then he stole his body to destroy the evidence. Nick tried to argue that it was all a setup by his wife. The fact that he couldn't find his wife's body is proof of that, because he's not dead. This was the scene he wanted to see, and Jamie couldn't take Nick's sophistry anymore, and Jamie couldn't stand Nick's bullshit any longer, and she was furious that he'd been making a monkey out of them all night. He was about to take him back to the station, but on the way, the car received another message. They followed the route of Nick's house. They found his wife's body. When he saw her, Nick vomited. He thought she was faking her death to set him up, but this only proves that there's someone else behind it. He'd been played for a fool all night. Then Jamie gave him the bad news. They found Carla's house based on Nick's confession, but there was no one there, and there was no one there. The neighborhood doesn't remember anyone named Carla. In other words, Carla doesn't exist. At this point, all the cops are convinced that Nick had poisoned him for the sake of his wife's fortune. He couldn't face his own guilt. He made up the story about Carla, and Nick was a fool. He didn't know who was behind it. Next thing you know, the judge signs the order. They can't charge Nick, but it didn't end there. That's when the reversal really began. Just as Jamie was taking Nick away, Nick attacked him and ran away. Jamie went after him, but Nick didn't get very far before he fell to the ground. Then he felt a heart attack, and Jamie just followed him with indifference, like a hunter watching his prey. And then he kicked Nick in the ass, and then he told him the whole truth. All of it. It was all Jamie's plan, and he did it to avenge his wife. It turns out that one night 10 years ago, drunken Nick and his wife ran a red light and crashed into Jamie's car. Jamie's wife was badly hurt, trapped. Jamie begged them to call the police for help, but Nick and his wife fled the scene in cold blood. Jamie and his daughter were trapped in the car. After an hour, they were found by a passerby, but by then, his wife was already dead. For 10 years, he missed her every day. Luckily, his daughter remembered Nick's license plate. Jamie took out a picture of his daughter as she's now. When he saw it, Nick was devastated. Jamie's daughter was his girlfriend, Carla. To get revenge, the grown-up Carla approached Nick and coaxed him to tell her about the accident. After determining that he was the right target, father and daughter began their revenge plan. Carla first increased Nick's dependence on her. Then she got him to kill his wife. Then she went along with her father's plan to prove to everyone that he killed his wife without giving him a chance to defend himself. When he heard heard the truth, Nick's heart ached, he collapsed, and then Jamie told him something even more desperate. 8 hours earlier, Carla had put the same poison in his water. It's already in his bloodstream. His heart was about to stop beating. Without leaving a trace, Jamie and his daughter let Nick die in the same despair.